Welcome to the Inspiring Coaches Show, the podcast devoted to inspiring coaches to bring their professional dreams to life by revealing the knowledge, insights, and best practices of other inspiring coaches. I'm your host, Jen Anderson, PCC, early settler of the coaching industry, lover of all things coaching, and what coaching is doing to make the world a better place. Well, hello out there. Thank you so much for joining us for the Inspiring Coaches Show. And as you know by now, we start each episode with a celebration from a real world coach out there, someone just like you. And our celebration this week comes from life coach Alexa Jordan. And Alexa says, I received a really touching testimonial from a client recently after leading them through a self-discovery process. And here's an excerpt from that testimonial she received. Alexa asks powerful yet simple questions that lead to deep self-inquiry. She's looking to get to the crux of who you are and what you want from this life, focusing on both minute practices, changes, and big picture ideas. Alexa helped me see how what I didn't realize I wanted dances with the present moment. These sessions were practical yet imaginative. So yay, Alexa. It's always gratifying to know the power of the work that we're doing in the world as coaches. And I do apologize for goofing that up a little bit, but my guest and I were just talking about how coaches, if we try to be perfect, sometimes we miss the opportunity to be real. So I just was a magnificent demonstration of that, messing up and keep going. So I want to invite each of you, dear listeners, to think about sending in a celebration from your own work as a coach in the world. Just 2 or 3 quick sentences, something that you're celebrating. Of course, you have to keep confidentiality in mind with your clients, but I'll share a few of those, 1 or 2 of them with each episode. And I appreciate it if you'd send it in. So you can send that to Jennifer@coachingoutofthebox.com. Well, today our guest coach is Bea Trost, who is an associate certified coach. She's a graduate of the International Coaching Group Training Program and is a certified diversity coach and a certified grief coach. Bea has been a coach since 2016, mainly coaching in the workspace and gradually shifting into private life coaching. Bea has branded herself under the name My Coaching Collective, and her sessions are called Cookies and Tea. So we're going to ask her about that in just a minute. Today, Bea is ready to chat with me about her work in the world as a grief coach. And to get you centered on her topic, Bea has provided us with a quote: grief is a learning curve. All right, well, while you're pondering that bit of wisdom, we'll take a quick break to hear from our inspiring sponsor, and then we'll be right back with Bea Trost.
On behalf of all of us here at the International Coaching Group, we thank you for joining us today. Have you been thinking about becoming an ICF certified coach? Reach out to an enrollment coach and ask about our Fast Track to ICF credential. We would welcome the opportunity to support your coaching education journey from beginning to certification and beyond. Remember, every journey begins with a single step, so take the leap. Become an ICF certified coach. Your ACC credential is waiting for you.
Welcome back. And as a quick reminder, today we're talking about how our guest, Bea Trost, is applying her coaching skills to clients who are navigating the process of loss. Hi, Bea.
Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, I'm thrilled because when we first met, which is not too terribly long ago, I was so inspired by your commitment and your passion around the work you're doing. So I've got a bunch of questions, but I want to start with the name of your sessions, Cookies and Tea. You said that's a cute story. Where did that come from?
It is a cute story. So I never thought about coaching private persons, and it just so happened that friends of mine thought that I was a great confidant. And what happened is, since I always had an open door policy, friends would just drop in, sit on the couch, and shed whatever weight was on their shoulders. And just to create a cozy atmosphere, I served tea or coffee and nibbles, mostly cookies. And that became a thing. So listening to friends became coaching, and drop-ins became scheduled meetings, and these cookies and tea were kind of the intro for people to really sit down, relax, and then start talking. And it was branded by coaches as the cookies and tea sessions, and I just kept it with me because it's a very cute backstory. And I like I like the fact that my coaches came up with the name.
Mm. Wow, I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And there's so much about you that's the word that I would use. Is beautiful. And so I'm going to dive into that a little bit more so our listeners can understand why that's my impression of you.
Okay.
Right. So thank you for joining me today to talk about your unique niche, which is providing grief coaching. So I'm curious, Bea, how did you come to position yourself in this niche?
Well, my journey with grief is twofold, really. First, I am no stranger to grief. I lost my children in 2015, and my partner died just shortly after that, very unexpectedly. And I was lucky enough to live in China at that time, so to be living in a culture that would have a very different approach to grief and to loss. And I was greatly supported by the friends I had there, by especially my Chinese friends and my Chinese colleagues. And well, I had at some point learned to move on and create a new life. When things were finally going really, really well, COVID hit. And it became clear at some point that I had to move back to Europe. And upon arriving here, I also knew I needed help, and I couldn't find the help that I really desperately needed. And rather on the contrary, because if you know European systems, especially the German system, they're not especially friendly, especially when you're coming in from the outside. And even, or maybe especially when you're a native, as I am a German native. And I tried to rebel long enough against a new me here in Europe, and probably a lot due to the training I had done with the ICG and a lot of coaching that I received myself. I finally thought that, okay, Bea, you need help. Help isn't coming. So what are you going to do with it? Create your own. And not just for me, because the second thing that I got aware on this journey is what I observed trying to make sense of my new world is that I wasn't alone. It was post-COVID. It was the early days of the war in Ukraine. It was the at times utterly disrespectful mass layoffs, first in the US and then in Europe. And the identities that people had built around themselves, around their couples, around their families, their sense of security, equity and equality, there were so many lives first changed by an existence of something and then by the absence of it. And such an identity altering type of loss will force us to learn new habits. It will force us to transform and to be able to predict the world that we're living in now. But we have to learn how to restore a meaningful life, all the while that we are utterly exhausted, that we are very disoriented and hurting. So the common denominator I found in both my journey and the people I had sitting in front of me, most of my coaches, is we often didn't know what we were dealing with because we didn't identify what we were dealing with as grief.
Mhm. So much that you said in that makes such perfect sense around that, the sense of loss. And I was also struck as we were prepping for the show, was that sense of that distinction between loss and grief, and kind of the what it really means. So one of the things that really struck me was your quote that you shared, which is that grief is a learning curve. What does that really mean, Bea?
So grief is experience in the face of loss. So this is where the loss and the grief finally come together. Especially if it's a loss that has formed or is forming your identity. So the big question really is like, what are we learning? And maybe we can think of adaptation as possibility. So I might just go into a little bit of definition here. So grief is most commonly known as a reaction to a death of a loved one. But it doesn't need to be solely caused by these events. For example, a few examples that I have is absent grief, which is something I see very often. So people that are soldiering through a certain loss and the absence of something, and they soldier through their distress and eventually burn out. So this absent grief, is when we don't recognize it, that we should be grieving, and it's making you sick along the way. Another big one that I come across quite regularly is anticipated grief or anticipatory grief. It's when you know that something will end. This could be a diagnosis, an illness, but it can also be a divorce, job loss. It can be your kids moving out, right? It can be me growing old and not being able to do my most favorite sports any longer because my knees hurt, right? So that's another one, and one that I am also especially familiar with is disenfranchised grief. And that's when you're denied the socio-cultural permission to grieve. And if you look at it from my perspective, coming back from China, finding the German system just really awful, but being punished for allegedly ranking countries. So I wasn't allowed to grieve China, and that was not very helpful, to say at least. Does that make sense in the bigger the bigger picture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the reasons why I was really excited to talk to you is I think there's just so little understanding of loss and the role of grief. And it's certainly, I'm in the US, and I know culturally speaking here, there's just that sense of, okay, we'll give you just this amount of time. Now time's up. And that's it. Right. And so it's really interesting to be thinking about those different types of grief, and just this sense of it mapping so beautifully into coaching, Bea, because coaching is not transactional. It's not, okay, here, we just solved your problem, thanks for coming, see you some other time when you got a problem you want solved. It is this sense of growing over time, right? It's a journey. It's an ever deepening process of self-discovery. And that, from what I'm understanding from what you've shared, is that's the grieving and process and process of loss and moving through lends itself beautifully to coaching.
Yeah, and you brought up two very important parts of it. First is time.
Mhm.
We give people a certain amount of time. There is no right way to grieve, and there's no right or wrong amount of time. There's a ballpark as to where you as a coach can tell that if somebody is really like hasn't been moving on, hasn't been growing out of his or her grief, within a year or a year and a half, that you as a coach might not be the right support. So this is usually when you'd say, okay, this is getting complicated, and complicated grief usually means that you have to refer or you have to guide these people towards a therapist or a counselor. So that's one thing where time
Mm.
is indeed important. But yeah, as you said, like coaching isn't transactional, and the beauty of being a grief coach is grief isn't a pathology.
Mm.
It really is learning. And as somebody who understands him or herself as a coach as being the learning buddy of someone,
Mm.
literally the person that's with you on that journey, it's the person's work in the whole process, but you're there to support. You're really there to hold their space. And if I say hold the space of someone who's crying for a whole 45 minutes, that is very exhausting, but it's
Mm.
so rewarding if after 2 or 3 sessions the crying stops, or people come in and say, I finally feel good. I feel better.
Mm.
I feel a sense of purpose. And then you get to work on the new purpose. And this is just so incredibly rewarding, because this is, for me, the essence of coaching.
Mhm. And as you said that, I was kind of almost envisioning stages,
Mm-hmm.
right there. So to really, well, first of all, I also just want to say that one of our competencies really acknowledges that we're able to sit in a space of emotion and
Mm-hmm.
be with someone, not be in it with them, but be beside
Yes.
them, right? And you called it a learning buddy. And I think that goes to that word partnership
Mm-hmm.
within our definition of what coaching really is. It's partnering.
Yeah.
And so I'm just so respectful, especially within life coaching, of this that we are going to be sitting with a lot of emotion, no matter what kind
Mm-hmm.
of coaching we're doing within that life coaching end of
Yes.
our part of our profession. So I think you've really pointed out to a lot of things that can prompt us to be thinking deeper about the role of coaches. And in a niche like this, I mean, it's really, yeah. So that was one of the things that I wanted to pull out from you too, was that distinction. So how do you know, for example, how do you know when coaching is appropriate for a person versus counseling or therapy? Because there may be at some point some kind of a
Mhm.
pathology that is a
Mhm.
part of it. So what do you have to offer us around that?
Usually, if you've been coaching for a bit, you will be able to tell when emotions are extremely intense,
Mm-hmm.
to the point that just the existence of these emotions is hurting your coachee. And this is where you have to be vigilant, because you might be out of your league of really offering support. You could be running in parallel, of course, and always, but you may not be the sole supportive system for that kind of person at that moment. As I said, time is a factor. If you see that somebody hasn't been growing at all after a longer period, like we're talking a year and a half, it really is necessary to give these people a little bit more support in form of counseling or therapy. And there's one amazing change that has happened with COVID into 2022, is that complicated grief is finally a diagnosis in the DCM.
Mm.
So before that, therapists weren't really able to give that diagnosis because it wasn't there. It wasn't in their catalog of diagnosis. So now
Hmm.
it is, so you can actually call upon the right therapists. You can see into who's actually trained as a grief counselor, trained as a grief therapist, and they are actually now able to also give you the right diagnosis for what you have. Because and you might see that as well with your coaches, grief opens the door to a lot of mental health issues. And if these manifest, that's also a sign for you to say you need different support. Like it leads into depression. Most of the time, it isn't. There's a distinction between somebody who's depressed and somebody who's grieving. And now, since therapists are able to actually make that distinction openly and with a proper diagnosis, this is getting easier for people to be recognized as not depressed, but grieving. But if you see that somebody is, slowly moving into full-on depression, you need to have a little bit more support for these people. But it usually it boils down of your own understanding of growth and how fast people can work out of, a certain situation. And this is not unlike any situation, really. If you have somebody who's trying to change their jobs and they're dragging this decision for 1.5 years, you will eventually end up saying, okay, something is off here, right? So it's that progress that keeps, that doesn't manifest, and where you can, say, okay, this is definitely taking too long, this is definitely too painful, there's something else attached to it. So other than that, grief really in its learning, in the way how you learn with grief, in the way how you learn to create new purpose in your life, create a new life, is really great for coaching, because you can really get productive with people. And if the productivity doesn't manifest, then you have to think, and maybe also contact a therapist, just to get an update about what you want to do or what you should do.
That makes sense. I mean, you brought in some keywords there about what makes coaching is there's this sense of progress, right? Moving forward towards what the coachee is really looking for in their life. But also there's that sense of it's productive, right? The productivity piece within that. So I know that you've got a next stretch and answer that question that I think fits perfectly with what we just talked about. So go ahead and tell us what the next stretch is. And if you can, just create that link between what we were just talking about.
the next stretch, learning. I mean, grief is a learning curve. My entire life has been a learning curve, especially the last couple of years, few years.
I can only imagine. Yeah.
It's what has also been a learning curve really was me starting my coaching collective and being a life coach. And I got my practice grew really fast, really quickly. I didn't quite anticipate that. So and I had to close knowledge gaps rather quickly. Like, it's like when you all of a sudden have a lot of coaches and you just like sit there and you think like, whoa, I actually have like some really dangerous half knowledge right here, but let me go back and check. So, but there is the good news is there is tons of literature. There are webinars and training courses, and you really just have to be honest with yourself, identify what's missing in your practice, get, make the time and spend the effort. So that's one thing, like how I continually grow myself as a coach. But there's another thing that stood out for me while starting my coaching practice. I have a very diverse group of coaches. So I coach people in the States, in Canada, all over Europe. I coach in 3 languages. So that covers the English part, the German part, and the French part. I have people in China. And so something that I recognized was that, below the surface of, what makes us different, we as human beings are funnily alike. And I saw, despite the diversity, I saw patterns reoccurring again and again. And I thought, like, this must be a human thing then. Like, if everybody has that understanding of this has to be something that's within us. And I got intrigued, and then I thought, you know what, why don't you really invest yourself into learning, Bea? And I enrolled full-time as a student studying psychology. And it's been very rewarding because it gives a lot of answers how we, like, about our awareness, how we perceive things, what our brain does, you know, when we're sleeping, when we're not sleeping. And it allows for a catalog of questions that is a lot simpler and a lot more productive. But yeah, it is a huge investment of time, of money. Like, it is resource sensitive, definitely, but it is I'm like, every day I start my second shift as a student, I actually feel that this was a great decision, and that's a feeling that I can just celebrate.
And this is actually a formal degree, right, that you're pursuing around this in psychology, is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is a real university. I mean, what's a great thing about, you know, being you know, having how to say that, a good thing that came out of the pandemic was the ability to study and to work remotely. So you do not have to actually sit in a university, although that's really funny. But you can do it online, so you can pace yourself. You can learn a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on, you know, how your practice goes. It is. I've run out of excuses to not do it, to be honest.
Right. Well, and part of coaching, you know, part of our ethics and actually our competencies is that we continually learn, that we're growing ourselves, right?
Yes.
So that we're deepening our understanding of what it means to be a coach in the world, but also understanding more and more about coaching. And so I've always said that there's well, I don't know if this is worldwide or not, but there's a joke always in the US that I'm a psychology major, and that means I'll be working at Starbucks, you know. But coaching, I think, has been the answer to what's your career path if you're fascinated by psychology, just psychology, right? Not psychiatry or, you know, the medical model, but how does the human brain work? And
yes.
you know, what are people, you know, anyway, you know what I'm talking about, I hope. But here we are. And so you're backing into a coach first, psychology degree second. And I think it's just great to give that nod to the underpinnings of what we do. All right. So Bea, we only have a couple minutes left. So if you could just tell us really quickly, what do you find most inspiring in your work?
The diversity of people. It is never boring. That's something I have to say. I have, maybe it's just me being lucky, but I have such a great group of coaches which are teaching me through being themselves a lot about myself as well. So I continue growing alongside them, which is really nice. But it really is, you know, in times where we see so much bad coming out of the human brain, actually sitting in a space with a person who's just absolutely beautiful is something that keeps me going. And it's also something that inspires me to learn more and to grow more, because I want to make right by these people. I want to be the best coach for these beautiful minds. And it really is a love a love relationship. Like every time I switch on my computer, and I know I'm gonna have this person or that person, or it's just I'm really genuinely looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to what they haven't done. I'm looking for why. Looking
Mhm.
forward to what they have done and why, what helped them, what got in the way, all these things is, yeah, it's just, it never fails to amaze me.
Thank you for that reminder that that's why we do this. And I think it's the whole goal of this show is to inspire coaches, right? And so to remember if we're not curious, if we're in a space of not being able to wait to find out what's happened for them, where are they now with it?
Mhm.
We need to require, well, need, oops. Anyway, I think it's really valuable for us to consider being in that space always with our coaching. So thank you for being a beautiful representation of that. And I do think
My
you made
pleasure.
me right. You made me right today. You are beautiful, and now all our listeners can see why I feel that way. So how can coaches find you? What's the best way to reach out to you if they want to continue this conversation with you?
So I do have a website. It's mycoachingcollective.com, and there are contact forums, not just one. I think there's a total of 4 contact forums. Pick a forum. They will land in my inbox, and I will respond. Maybe not within the next 5 minutes, but I will definitely respond. And I'm looking forward to anybody contacting me about, maybe also getting into the same niche of being a grief coach, because it's so important. It
Mm,
is really so important that we keep the conversation going around what loss is for us, how we learn from loss, and how we get to be more resilient and better people through understanding and working through that grief and loss.
mhm. And there's your passion right there for all of us to hear. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Bea, for being here today and helping to inspire coaches worldwide. I just love the fact 3 languages. I have high school French, and it's very scary. But I think you've definitely inspired all of us. And so we're going to take a quick break here. But if you can hang out for just a second, I want to thank you formally. And for everybody else, when we come back, we'll share with you how you can apply to be a guest on the Inspiring Coaches Show.
Hi, I'm so glad you're here. You may be wondering, why start your own coaching business? Well, one of the key benefits of starting a coaching business is that it allows you to help others succeed. You can help your clients set and achieve their goals, learn new skills, and make positive changes in their lives. This can be an extremely rewarding experience. It can help you build relationships of trust with your clients and help you feel more fulfilled in your work. Owning your own coaching business is a great way to do what you love, to be able to choose your clients and set your own rates and work where and when you want. When you start your own coaching business, you have more potential for work-life balance, and you can work on your own terms. So this means that you can choose the work that you want to take on and set your own hours. You're in charge of your own business. You have control over your life and your work schedule. Another benefit of starting a coaching business is that it's often quite profitable, and there's lots of demand for coaching services. This makes coaching a great business opportunity for aspiring entrepreneurs like you. Owning your own business can be a great way to ensure that you can secure your future and that you're able to take more control of your destiny. It's an empowering feeling when you're more in control and are more certain about the path you want to take in your life. It's time to put yourself in the driver's seat and take that next important step in your career journey. You've got this, and we're here to help.
All right. So my invitation is for you to apply to be a guest. The Inspiring Coaches Show is looking for inspiring guests. So if you're interested in joining me on the show, please send an email to jennifer@coachingoutofthebox.com and include your topic idea and a short blurb on how you think it will inspire coaches to bring their professional dreams to life. Well, as we all know, inspired coaches believe in expressing gratitude. So thank you so much to Bea Trost. And it's actually Bea. I heard you pronouncing it differently than I am.
Yeah, my mom calls me Beate when I've done something really, really bad. Germans call me Bea, but actually I prefer Bea because
You
it's just like
do.
it's shorter.
I love it for you too. I think it fits you perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Bea. And thank you to our sponsor, the International Coaching Group. And most of all, thank you to our dear coach listeners out there for committing yourself to constantly seeking the inspiration to bring your coaching dreams to life. Until next time, I'm Jen Anderson, and this is the Inspiring Coaches Show.